Die Gedanken sind frei.
My thoughts freely flower.
Die Gedanken sind frei.
The purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm your host, Ed Liggett. Today we're going to talk about church and state news. And I'm going to be assisted in this by our producer, Catherine Fahringer. Catherine, welcome to Freethought Forum.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, let's just start out. Our first story this morning is based on the House leadership. The House leadership has found time to reintroduce a constitutional amendment aimed at encouraging organized prayer in the public schools. It is obviously a campaign ploy by the supporters of Bob Dole and the opportunity to pander to the Christian Coalition. The Christian Coalition could use the floor fight to determine those that are for us or against us, so to speak. A constitutional amendment intended to open the door to school prayer would, in my opinion, erode the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. Catherine, what do you think about that?
I certainly agree. And why don't they ever get tired of this? Why don't they tend to state business and leave public schools alone with this prayer thing? Now, just the other day, I read Blanco was going to pray because we've had the drought, and they were going to try to break the drought by appealing to the Almighty. And the mayor up there said that he said, although religion and prayer are private and most people prefer to practice them in private, I still think we will have a good turnout for this joint effort. Well, where did he get the idea it was private? Every time I go anywhere, I have to pray, even a luncheon, for crying out loud. So I don't understand it. I do not. Now, he's got the idea it's private, and the House has the idea that let's make them pray and pray together publicly in public schools. Mm-hmm. Grr.
I think the question is, why can't we ever resolve anything in this country? I mean, we've gone through this thing over and over again, and we're like reinventing the wheel again.
Yeah.
So here we are again, the House, and perhaps they're just playing politics. Maybe this isn't going anywhere, because most of the analysis of this amendment says nobody is going to really push it.
I mean, been there, done that. It's over. Let's quit.
Right.
It's like a dog with a bone that doesn't have any meat on it anymore. Mm-hmm. Quit it, House, Senate, President, everybody, stop.
Well, you heard it from Catherine Fahringer, so stop it. Okay, and our next story in San Francisco. In San Francisco, recently the religious leaders, the same city that gave birth to the United Nations, also met to create a new united religion. Their idea is to establish an organization to promote understanding among religions and to be a resource for helping world governments to tackle global problems, such as third world poverty, environmental degradation, and ethnic and religious conflict. The guy in charge of this is the Reverend William Swing. He's Episcopal Bishop of California. He recently undertook a 3-month world tour. This was during the spring to support this idea. Now, he didn't have much. Initially, he had quite a bit of success. But the main groups, such groups as the Roman Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and senior Islamic leaders, I would imagine they're talking about the ones from Iran, have not backed this particular idea. There's also recognition that many of the conflicts, according to the religious leaders, that the conflicts are religious-based, and the first order of business is to clean up their own backyard first.
I agree.
So what do you think of this idea, Catherine?
Well, every time they love to do this, well, let's all of us religions get together now and let's do something. Mm-hmm. And you toss that word ecumenical out all the time, and they're always trying to hold hands. Well, why don't they just chuck their religions and let's just have one religion and everybody be it and shut up about this ecumenical stuff? They only get along for a period of time necessary, maybe, like to accomplish taking over the government, and then they'd kill each other, which would be pleasant if I were still around, but I would have been burned at the stake. So you get a rough idea of how I feel about this whole thing. It's silly. You never solved anything with religion. You solve things without it, I think.
Well, there's another part of this. I think one of the basic founders of our Constitution, Madison, he claimed that the competition between the religious factions was the guarantor of our religious freedoms. And it means as long as they're fighting, then we're not going to have any problems.
But somebody's going to win one day. That's the problem.
That's the
because
problem.
of this infiltrating into government and becoming, as I said last time, the government, so to speak. Then we're in trouble. And this is what worries me a lot. So if they want to fight their little fights, that's fine and dandy. But whenever they're going to unite on some cause, you know, it ain't going to work. They're going to say.
Now there's one other thing that just crossed my mind is the sort of non-governmental organizations. And I just ran across this about 2 or 3 months ago. And these organizations are supposed to be the organizations that pass out aid to the different people and agencies within a conflict area. For example, the Catholic
relief thing. Or whatever
yes, they have
it.
one out of Baltimore, and then there's one that works out of England. And
Catholic or a different
no,
variety?
I'm not so sure about this one. This has more political.
I mean, if it is English, it might be Church of England.
I don't think they really get that involved in it, Catherine. The thing that bothered me about this is that they were in some of the places that we had been before, Bosnia, and this last little exploration that our troops were sent to over in one of the African nations. And it seems to me what happens is that we take the aid over there, and at that particular one, and it escapes my mind, the one in Africa, that our primary focus was on aid. We were there to feed the people, and then the mission changed, if you recall. This mission was, then we went after the head man, we were going to arrest him and everything, and all of a sudden we got so many of our guys killed. And I was just astonished to find out that the Catholic Relief Fund was there, and I was trying to figure out, well, why were they there? And it seems, from what information I have gathered,
stealing grain and other.
Well, it seems that we are taking the aid, giving it to these agencies, and they in turn are giving it to everyone else. And in doing this, of course, this is giving them a great opportunity to do their thing with the people and pass off religion as, we're doing this, not the government. And they have named these people non-governmental organization. And I thought, my goodness, we are supporting this type of thing. Why aren't they doing their own thing and we pay the AID? I can't think that we have our own agency that takes care of this. And so this sort of just amazed me that we would allow some government or some form of a government to come between us and the policy that we would have in these organizations. And of course, if you recall, we really got out of there very soon, and it was not a happy time for us. So whenever we start thinking about religion in that sense, and I want people to understand that this is a constitutional republic. We're not a Christian nation. We're a constitutional
You'll never convince
republic.
them. Never.
And we have to understand that. And it's very important that we remain that way, because once we change, we're going to be no different than some of the other places of conflict, like Northern Ireland, Bosnia, and places of that nature. So I thought I'd just pass that little information on.
Yeah, well, it makes me so happy to hear about and they're probably dipping their hands in there and making money on the side besides, which they have done on several occasions and been slapped on the wrist delicately for.
Well, I did write a letter to the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, because she actually introduced aid to Bosnia through the Catholic Relief Organization, also through the Muslims. And somehow or another, the Serbs didn't get any cut of this. So I don't know what's going to happen in that regard. I think they were waiting for their leader to resign or something to happen to him. And it seems to me that he has already decided that he's no longer part of the government we finally put enough pressure on them, so now maybe aid will be flowing through them too. But I was struck by the fact that the First Lady would make the announcement of this aid, being that she is not really a head of government or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe they thought that would sort of cool the church-state thing with the Catholics being involved in the... But they've been around for years. They've been doing this. I wish we had neutral agencies that would take care of this. I hate this thing because I know it's always sing for your supper. We'll feed you, but look what we have here. We'll introduce you to Jesus.
So, well, we hope that this United Religions thing turns out only from the standpoint that these agencies will have some kind of influence in stopping some of these so-called religious conflicts. And that leads us up to Northern Ireland. And you know,
Well,
in
that's always
Northern,
a nice little
speaking
tame
of
place,
religious
isn't it?
conflicts, the Troubles returned to the city and streets of Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
The flashpoint on this occasion was the Protestant insistence on parading through the Catholic community to celebrate a century-old victory over the Catholics. The police initially prevented the march, but when Protestants began rioting, relented and allowed the march to proceed. The inevitable happened. The Catholics riot. Catherine, I don't know what's going to become of that particular problem over there.
I don't either. It seems to have been going on forever, certainly, through my lifetime.
Yes.
It seems like.
Yeah.
I don't know why. They just love provoking each other, don't they?
Yes.
Just love it.
Yes.
And
Absolutely no sensitivity whatsoever. I saw no point in that at all.
oh, it's something they won 100 years ago, for crying out loud. Now all they're going to do is get beat this time around. I think they better just let it lie.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out myself, basically, why the church, the Pope perhaps, could go over there and resolve this problem. You know, at least be a mediator to resolve this problem. Or is he part of the problem?
Well,
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah. Well, during my time, as a military man, I was in England for a long time, and I had an opportunity to listen to some of these people, particularly the leaders, Sinn Féin, and also the Ulster Constabulary, I think they were called at that time. And I have never seen such hateful people in all my days. I mean, they couldn't agree on anything but to hate each other, and it was amazing, man. This a really powerful hate. And the thing is, what started this whole conflict between these two folks happened centuries and centuries ago, and it has no bearing on their livelihood today, except that they want to keep throwing it in each other's face. Now, pretty soon it'll be the Catholics' turn to march, and I don't know whether.
Yeah, then the Protestants will riot. Oh well.
Yeah, so it's a continuing thing, and I cannot understand a line drawn down in the middle of a street and saying, well, this belongs to the Catholics and this belongs to the Protestants. It's a really shameful episode in our history, and it's something that the British government needs to resolve and resolve quickly.
I don't know how. They've been working at it for years, seems like.
Well, there's something else that perhaps would interest you is in Washington, D.C.
What bomb you going to drop now?
Well, President Clinton may have shown some sensitivity to the state of church fires in Afro-American communities, but if taxpayers are asked to finance the construction of burned churches, he will probably probably will get a state church challenge. However, the scope of church arsons are surprising. The Justice Department claimed 297 arsons since 1990, and an Associated Press survey found 409 burnings. In Texas, according to USA Today, there were 20 fires involving white churches, 11 involving black churches since 1995. So how do you see these church burnings and our president's reaction
Well,
to it?
isn't it strange what the media pick up on? Because when you look behind the things that in the paper, the headlines, you find that actually the burnings, the articles I read said they were on the decline. They were fewer. That there was a large proportion of white churches that were burned. So why all of a sudden are we picking this thing up as being, I think somebody wants to fan the racial flames, don't they, besides burn churches? I don't understand this thing.
Why are they just burning churches, do you think?
Yeah, well, but why would they leap on it without looking into the statistics that they've kept over the years on this particular kind of crime and find out more about it before they say, oh boy, look, the whites are really burning black churches. They're out there doing it, and they found out that some blacks were burning their own churches. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of the
money?
The money that
bad news, silly, bad, wrong. Sorry about that. If the communities feel bad about it, let them chip in and pay for it. But I don't think taxpayers ought to be tapped for that. That's ridiculous. And we're just constantly doing things like that. Uncle Sam picks up the tab for everything. It says in the Constitution you're not supposed to when it's religious. I don't get it.
Okay. Well, I tend to agree with you on that. I hope the Freedom from Religion Foundation will get onto that one. And so that's an important thing.
Well, the Austin Atheists jumped on that right away, and they read how they're doing anything without Madeline, I've never understood. But somebody has stepped into the spokesperson slot and issued a press release and said that the American Atheists objected to President Clinton suggesting that taxpayers pay for the rebuilding of the black churches that had burned. So.
And the thing that I find unique about this is, and again we go back to the founding fathers, one of the first problems that Madison incurred was this issue of paying churches and paying school teachers that had church connections. And he was adamantly against any kind of payments to these teachers or to anything to do with churches and the federal government.
I wish he were alive today.
Yeah. Well, I think people tend to forget these things because
forget them. They never knew them.
Well, I'm not so sure. You know, I went to school too. I went to, and those are the things, the basic things that we learn as young kids in school, along with the other Pledge of Allegiance and all this other stuff that we had to go through when we were kids. But we did learn that, and that's fundamental to
well, I thought so too, but it doesn't seem to be. Whether they quit right after you graduated, I don't know, but it's not so. By the way, there is here, speaking of ecumenical, as we were a few minutes ago, there is an ecumenical center for health and medicine out at the medical center. And a Don Anderson is the head of it, or used to be. I don't know whether he still is. He also wrote for the North San Antonio Times, a little weekly paper, and he wrote the most appalling article about the burning of the churches, and he blamed, guess who? The evil atheists. Oh. The bad atheists. Yeah. Well, I just tell you, I'm just so busy burning churches. I come on, give me a break. Atheists don't burn. I loved Stan Grayson wrote a letter to the editor in response to that terrible column.
And Stan Grayson is the former president
of Secular Humanist Association of San Antonio, right on. And he saw that column. I hadn't seen it, and he jumped right on it, and he said, his punchline was wonderful. He said, atheists, I said, churches, ignore them. But burn them? No.
No, that is not something, and it's amazing that 89% of the people in this country consider themselves religious, or religion is very important to them. So they only release 11%, I think, to go around and do all these
terrible things and mess up public restrooms. Yeah. I have a thing about that too. Yeah. I've decided Christians are the real messes of the world.
Yeah. Well, trust me, atheists and people like that, they don't do those things. They're not interested in doing those.
They're responsible people, and they respect other people, and they respect public property, and it's just and private property, and all all good things. I don't know of any, we've got some oddballs, I have to admit, sure. We've got some people I think are a little, got a few marbles loose up there, but they're harmless. They're just kind of most of them I found had such terrible religious indoctrination as children that they never did quite recover.
No.
And although they became atheists, they still have these little strange influences of that awful, I call it child abuse.
Yes. Well, we try to explain to people over and over again that the only time really atheists and the religious community clash heads is when the religious community imposes themselves on top of us, and that's the problem.
And
we can't go to school. We go to school. We don't go to school to pray. We go to school to learn, to get better jobs for ourselves and jobs for our kids later on down the line. I mean, sometimes I think we have to be the laughing stock of the world. I mean, everybody else is learning to be engineers, and what are we fighting about?
Prayer in school.
This is crazy. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And abortion.
The things that have nothing to do with the government per se, because I think the government has no right interfering in our private lives. And when they do, believe me, you play. It's very difficult to get them out of your life.
Yeah.
So I am, let me just go ahead and close this portion of it about churches, the burning churches. We condemn the burning of churches. We condemn any arsonists. That's not the way to do things in America. We don't care about arsonists. And we certainly hope that all the arsonists that are out there trying to burn churches or burning down anything else get caught and get their just rewards. Okay,
now,
there was something else that struck my fancy this time around, and that was in France. And this is sort of was a shock to me because there was, in 1990, there was a French law, and it makes it a criminal offense to challenge facts of the Holocaust as determined by French courts or the 1945 International War Crimes Tribunal at Nuremberg. This law came to my attention recently when a French cleric, Abbé Pierre, and I hope I pronounced his name correct, known as the Prophet of the Poor, caused a furor in Paris when he endorsed the author of a book, Roger Garaudy's The Founding Myth of Israeli Policy, which raised questions about the Holocaust. Now, first of all, I'm going to say something about Abbé Pierre. This guy is one of the most popular clerics in France. He does everything for the poor. He's involved in all the social services. I mean, he is very, very popular. But let's just figure out what happened to this gentleman who had never seemed to put his foot wrong. Now, even though Abbé Pierre endorsed the integrity of the author and not the book, he was castigated in the media. He was expelled from the International League Against Racism and Anti-Semitism. He was denounced by the French Episcopate, I don't know what that is,
Episcopate,
and repudiated by social groups he supported. Critics of how the press covered the affair argued that efforts to curb debate on the Holocaust will damage the fight against extremism. A campaign to repeal the 1990 law is promised. Now, I got this from the Christian Science Monitor. Now, this to me is really an issue about speech, and I don't understand why people are so upset about this particular gentleman and why they jump down on this particular person so hard. Now, I am going to be writing something about the Holocaust myself, and I'm very happy that there is no law against this. Now, in my thinking about the Holocaust, it happened. There's no way of getting around it. I can't understand all the pictures and all the eyewitness reports, et cetera, et cetera. It's simply unthinkable that people can sit there and say it didn't happen. It happened, folks. And the fact is that For those of you who would deny that it happened, there's plenty of books in the library, plenty of pictures, plenty of reports
Museum in
of
Washington.
yes, everywhere you want to go. Yes, the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C. Plenty of memorials. Listen, it happened. And however, I want to make it clear that I blame, in many respects, the Jewish community for this because they have done their best to stifle debate about this. If you're right about something, why try to keep people from talking about it? It's in your interest. There are some good things and bad things about this Holocaust, mainly the fact that there were a lot of Jews involved in hurting Jews themselves. And we all know about that. I mean, it's part of history. But still in all, you got to take the good with the bad. I see no point whatever in trying to keep people from talking about this. Let's just get it out in the open and let people express themselves. And at least maybe like the never again proclamation, maybe it won't happen again.
Well, this sort of thing needs to be addressed early on in the schools, where they learn facts, historical facts, and not fiction. So that's where it should be addressed. But yeah, you're right. I don't like it, and there've been some terrible things in this country where they've had a lot of publicity. I think this is what is hurtful. They get noticed, and then other people believe that they're right on this crazy idea they've got that it never happened. Oh, please. But I don't understand. This is kind of puzzling to me, too, in that you make laws to shut people up. And I don't understand. It says he endorsed the integrity of the author, but not the book.
Right.
Well,
he claimed he never read the book. He was just saying, yes, this man's integrity is above reproach.
Oh, but he wrote this book, and I don't like it. I haven't read it, but I hate it.
No, okay, maybe I didn't get it right. No, but actually, Abby Pierre, he is a friend of this gentleman. He said the man's integrity is above reproach. He wrote that in as a 4 words to his book.
Oh.
Abby never read the book, but because he actually took the time to say that, yes, this man is a decent man, they jumped all over him. And poor Abby said, well, maybe I should read the book and find out what it's all about. But it won't change anything because this man is my friend. And people have the right to write. Even the bad people have the right to write what they please. And I was struck by this law. I didn't know there was a law. And these are the kind of things that happen.
The French weren't exactly noble, as I recall, during World War II. So what are they bitching about?
That's correct. And as a matter of fact, I think it's only recently that they, even the government, took the time to say that, yes, we were responsible for shipping out a lot of the Jews.
Yes, they were.
Well, okay, that's it for us. I had a good time talking. And next time I promise to let Catherine do most of the talking.
Oh, no, I did too much,
Catherine,
probably.
thank you for being on this edition of Freethought Forum. I'm your host, Ed Liggett. Please join us again next week. Thank you.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. And should tyrants take me and throw me in prison, my thoughts will burst free like blossoms in season.
Foundations will crumble and structures will tumble,
and free people shall cry, Die Gedanken sind frei, and free people shall cry, Die Gedanken